For millions of Americans who've relied on Social Security as their primary income source, this increase addresses the growing gap between fixed benefits and the rising cost of essential expenses like groceries, medications, and utilities. But here's what nobody's explaining clearly. Not everyone qualifies automatically, and the deposit amounts vary significantly based on your specific benefit category and earning history. Let me break down exactly who's receiving these payments, why the amounts differ, and most importantly, what you need to verify right now to ensure you're not left behind. Let me be absolutely clear about something right from the start. This isn't about some mysterious government windfall that appeared out of nowhere. What we're seeing this week is the result of a complex series of adjustments that have been working their way through the Social Security system for several months now. And the timing of these deposits coinciding with the middle of November is no accident. The Social Security Administration operates on very specific payment schedules, and when large-scale adjustments like this get approved, they get rolled out in waves based on your birth date, your benefit type, and when you originally filed for benefits. Understanding this timing is crucial because it explains why your neighbor might have already received their deposit while you're still checking your account every morning. The core of what's happening revolves around three separate but interconnected factors that have all converged at the same time. First, we have the annual cost of living adjustment that was calculated based on inflation data. From the third quarter of last year through the third quarter of this year, the Consumer Price Index showed significant increases in specific categories that directly impact retirees. Healthcare costs, housing expenses, and food prices all climbed at rates that exceeded the general inflation numbers you hear about in the news. Second, there's a retroactive correction component that many people don't know about. The SSA discovered calculation errors in certain benefit categories going back several years, and rather than making people file claims individually, they're processing these corrections automatically and issuing lump sum payments to make up for the underpayments. Third, there's a supplemental adjustment for people who were affected by the earnings test penalty in previous years, but have since reached full retirement age, meaning they're now entitled to recalculation of their benefits without those penalties factored in. Now, when you combine all three of these elements, you start to see how someone could receive a deposit that's substantially larger than their regular monthly benefit. The $2,400 figure that's being reported represents the higher end of what some recipients are seeing, particularly those who had multiple years of retroactive corrections combined with the current year's COLA increase and the earnings test recalculation. But here's where it gets tricky and where a lot of confusion is happening. Not everyone gets the same amount, and not everyone gets it at the same time. The SSA processes these payments in batches, and they prioritize based on several factors, including when you originally filed, whether you're receiving retirement benefits or disability benefits, and whether you have any outstanding issues on your account, like overpayments from previous years or ongoing appeals. Let's talk about who's seeing the largest deposits first, because this is where the most excitement is happening and also where the most misconceptions are spreading. If you filed for early retirement benefits before reaching your full retirement age and you continued working, you were subject to the earnings test, which reduced your benefits by $1 for every $2 you earned above a certain threshold. Once you reached your full retirement age, those penalties stopped. But what many people don't realize is that the Social Security Administration is supposed to recalculate your benefit amount to account for the months when your benefits were reduced. This recalculation doesn't happen automatically at full retirement age. It can take months or even years to process depending on how backlogged the system is. What we're seeing now is a massive catch-up effort where the SSA is processing thousands of these recalculations simultaneously and issuing the back payments all at once. If you fall into this category and you've been at full retirement age for 2 or 3 years without seeing this recalculation, you could be looking at a substantial lump sum payment. The second group seeing significant deposits are people who were affected by the windfall elimination provision or the government pension offset. Now, these are two of the most complicated and controversial rules in the entire Social Security system, and they affect people who worked in jobs that didn't pay into Social Security, typically government employees, teachers in certain states, and some railroad workers. The WEP reduces your Social Security benefit if you also receive a pension from work where you didn't pay Social Security taxes, and the GO can reduce or eliminate spousal or survivor benefits under similar circumstances. There's been ongoing litigation and legislative pressure to reform or eliminate these provisions. And while they haven't been eliminated entirely, there have been modifications to how they're calculated. Some people are now seeing corrections to their benefit amounts based on these modifications. And because these corrections can go back several years, the lump sum payments can be quite substantial. The third category involves people who had their benefits suspended or reduced due to overpayment claims. This is one of the most frustrating situations that Social Security recipients face. You receive a notice saying you were overpaid sometime in the past, often due to an error that wasn't your fault, and suddenly your monthly benefits are being reduced to recover that overpayment. There have been numerous investigations and audits showing that many of these overpayment claims were incorrect or improperly calculated. The SSA has been reviewing these cases and issuing refunds for the amounts that were improperly withheld. If you've been dealing with an overpayment deduction for the past year or two, and you suddenly see a large deposit, this could be a refund of those withheld amounts plus interest. Now, I want to address something that's causing a lot of anxiety and confusion. What if you haven't received a deposit yet? Does that mean you're not eligible? Not necessarily. The payment schedule for these adjustments follows the same pattern as regular Social Security payments, which are distributed based on your birth date. If you were born between the 1st and the 10th of the month, your payments typically arrive on the second Wednesday of each month. If you were born between the 11th and the 20th, payments come on the third Wednesday. If you were born between the 21st and the end of the month, payments arrive on the fourth Wednesday. However, supplemental security income recipients receive their payments on the 1st of each month, and people who started receiving benefits before May 1997 also receive their payments on the 3rd of each month, regardless of birth date. So depending on which category you fall into, your adjusted payment might not arrive until later this month. There's another crucial factor that determines whether you'll receive one of these larger deposits, and it has to do with your earnings history and how your benefits were originally calculated. Social Security benefits are based on your highest 35 years of earnings indexed for inflation. If you didn't work for 35 years, zeros are averaged in, which lowers your benefit amount. But here's what's interesting. If you continued working after you started receiving benefits, those additional years of earnings might replace some of your lower earning years in the calculation, which would increase your benefit amount. The SSA is supposed to automatically recalculate your benefits each year to account for any additional earnings. But this process has been severely delayed due to staffing shortages and system backlogs. What we're seeing now is a massive effort to catch up on several years' worth of these recalculations. If you worked during 2021, 2022, or 2023 while receiving benefits, and those earnings were higher than some of your earlier years, you could be due a recalculation that results in a higher monthly benefit going forward, plus a lump sum for the months when you should have been receiving that higher amount. Let me explain something else that's critically important, but rarely discussed: the way these adjustments interact with Medicare premiums. Most Social Security recipients have their Medicare Part B premiums deducted directly from their monthly benefits. The standard Part B premium changes every year. And there's a provision called the hold harmless rule that prevents your Social Security benefit from decreasing due to Medicare premium increases if you're already enrolled in both programs. However, this hold harmless protection doesn't apply to everyone, and it doesn't apply to supplemental increases like the ones we're discussing. So when you receive one of these larger deposits, it represents the gross adjustment before any Medicare premiums are deducted. If you're expecting $2,400, but your Medicare premiums haven't been paid for several months due to calculation delays, you might see a smaller net deposit. This doesn't mean you're not getting the full adjustment. It just means that outstanding Medicare premiums are being settled at the same time. Another aspect that's generating questions involves people who receive both Social Security retirement benefits and Supplemental Security Income SSI is a needs-based program with strict income and asset limits. And it's separate from Social Security retirement benefits, though both are administered by the same agency. If you receive SSI, any increase in your Social Security benefit can affect your SSI payment amount because SSI is reduced $4 by other income you receive. So, if you're seeing an increase in your Social Security payment, you might see a corresponding decrease in your SSI payment, and the net effect might not be as large as you initially expected. However, lump sum retroactive payments are treated differently under SSI rules. They're not counted as income in the month you receive them, but they do count as a resource. Which means if the lump sum pushes your total assets above the SSI limit, it could affect your eligibility. This is where things get complicated. And if you receive both benefits, you need to pay careful attention to how these adjustments might impact your overall situation. Let's talk about taxes for a moment, because this is another area where confusion abounds. Social Security benefits can be taxable depending on your total income. If your combined income, which includes your adjusted gross income, tax-exempt interest, and half of your Social Security benefits, exceeds certain thresholds, then up to 50% or even 85% of your benefits can be taxable. A large lump sum payment in a single year can push you into a higher tax bracket and make more of your benefits taxable than usual. However, there's a special rule for lump sum Social Security payments that allows you to allocate the payment back to the years when you should have received it, rather than treating it all as current year income. This can significantly reduce the tax impact, but you have to know to request this treatment and file the appropriate forms. Many tax preparers aren't familiar with this rule. So, if you receive a large retroactive payment, make sure you're working with someone who understands how to handle Social Security lump sums properly. I also want to address the verification process because this is where a lot of people get tripped up. If you receive a deposit that's larger than your normal Social Security payment and you're not sure why, the first thing you should do is check your online Social Security account. If you haven't created one yet, you can do so on the SSA website, and it will show you a detailed breakdown of your benefit history, including any adjustments, recalculations, or corrections. You should also receive a written notice explaining the deposit, but these notices can be delayed, and they're not always clear about exactly what the payment represents. If you can't find information in your online account and you haven't received a notice, you can call the Social Security Administration, but be prepared for long wait times. The best times to call are typically Wednesday through Friday, early in the morning, right when the lines open, or late in the afternoon. Avoid calling on Mondays or right after the 3rd of the month when call volumes are highest. One more critical point about timing. These deposits are going out this week, but this week is relative to when the SSA processes your particular case. The agency has been rolling out these payments in waves, and the wave that's hitting right now represents cases that were processed and approved in the last billing cycle. If your case requires additional verification, or if there are complications on your account, your payment might be in a later wave. The important thing is not to panic if you don't see a deposit immediately. The SSA has committed to processing all eligible adjustments before the end of the fiscal year, which gives them several more weeks to complete this effort. However, if you believe you should be receiving an adjustment based on the categories I've described, and you don't see anything by early December, that's when you should definitely reach out to verify your status. This